our speaker tonight, Professor Nikki Giovanni.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I have friends in the area. Kevin is here. You all stole Kevin from us. He was at Virginia Tech, and you did. It's like, yeah, and there you go. We lost Kevin. But that doesn't mean anything. But like, who the hell is Kevin? Why is she talking about him? But he's my friend. And I'm always glad to be up here in the Rochester area because you have such great history up here with Frederick Douglass, you know, the Erie Canal. I mean, it's a lot going on. Probably most of you, being young, don't think about it or think that it's significant. It's me. You know, I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of really wonderful friends, and that's the truth. But my most paranoid friend, I think by far, and I loved her so much, was Nina Simone. And Nina called me Giovanni. And she would say, Giovanni, have you noticed when I go on stage, the mic hums? And I'd say, oh, Nina, that's not true. But you know what it was? And 4 people spoke. And I walked up. If Nina was here, she was sitting there. Nina? No, I'm very glad to be here. This is an exciting area. I think that New York is being cheap. The governor is Little Cuomo, isn't it? And he's not his daddy, you know what I mean? And I think we need to pour some more money into this area because you've got a downtown that is absolutely beautiful, you know, dealing with the Erie Canal. You really do. And I know people think that people like me are always like, you know, ooh, Nikki doesn't like rich people. I like rich people. I have friends that are rich, you know, and it's always a pleasure to be around them. But I know that we can't have so many millionaires. We have too many billionaires and so many people that don't have a pot to piss in and when to throw it out of. That is not a good idea. And it's not for lack of a minimum wage, it's for lack of a living wage. And so one of the things that young people have to think about, because we have to keep you in school. Some of you are high schoolers, some of you are less than high schoolers as I'm looking out there. We have to get you through school because you're sitting around thinking you know something, you're stupid as all get out, and you're not, well, you know you are. This is not something that I'm bringing to you. And you haven't had time, you don't have the time to think the pressures that are on you are really tremendous, and all you're going to do is end up in a system called prison because we always seem to have money to send people to prison. And prison is an industry. It is not about justice. It's not about fairness. How in the world, excuse me, can you sentence somebody to 60 years in prison? That doesn't even begin to make sense. You know, who the hell can go to prison for 60 years and come out sane? That doesn't begin to make sense. And so we've got to rethink a lot of things, and I know this is the Nikki, you know, we're doing the Martin Luther King speech, and good for Martin. But we have to, it's not personal, but we have to rethink, and we need some radical thinking. I'm really tired of the kind of conservative thinking. I'm really unhappy with the president right now. And I have gone from being like, oh, I think he has issues, to I am unhappy. Don't ever tell me you don't need art history. If you don't need art history, then what in the world do you need? Don't tell me that you'll make more money doing something. You'll make more money selling drugs, damn it. You think you're a fool? We know that. This is not about making money. We don't educate you to make money. We educate you to be better human beings. We educate you to uplift yourself. And the President of the United States doesn't have the right to tell you you shouldn't learn something that will elevate who you are because you can earn a living. This is not about, life is not about earning a living. We're Americans, damn it. We will always have a living. That's the truth. I just thought somebody should mention that because I'm sick of people acting like all you're supposed to do is grow up and find a way to earn money. I think money is a good idea. I'm not against money. I'm not. I don't want you to think that. But this is not why you're on earth. You're on earth to do something better. And I got to say this to all the black kids in the room, and I don't know about the white kids, so it's not personal. But you need a passport. If you are colored, you need a passport. When somebody says, what do you want for your birthday? You need a passport. When a couple of people ask you, what do you need a passport, and go get a yellow fever shot, so that when somebody says, would you like to go to Africa, you don't have to say, ooh, I don't have a passport and I haven't had my shots. Go get your shots. You are ruining your, nothing wrong with Brockport. Like I said, I started off positive about Brockport, didn't I? But this is not your life. You have to go someplace. You have to get on an airplane. So, ooh, it might fall. I can tell you what will fall if you stay in Brockport. You got to do a little better. There's a world out there, and you have to go. And one of the things you'll learn is who you are. You'll see yourself in a different light. You will lift yourself up. I'm a big fan of Africa because Africa's there. I'm a big fan of Europe because Europe is there. You cannot get a bad meal, by the way, in Zurich, just in case you find yourself in Zurich. And you know why? That's what most people don't realize. Now, the Swiss are going to get mad at me for this, but it's true. Because when the Italians lost World War, the Nazis lost in World War II, a lot of the Italians migrated over to Switzerland so they wouldn't have to get, lynched, and or whatever we did to war criminals. Which means, of course, that's the bad side, that, oh, they escaped punishment. The good side is great Italian restaurants. So something good comes out of everything. We have to find a way to go forward. No, you have to go to the world. You have to eat food. You have to drink alcohol. I'm always disenchanted with people that say things like, oh, you shouldn't drink. You have to learn to drink champagne. Why else would you? There are many people who wouldn't get up in the morning unless they knew that before the end of the day they could have a lovely glass of champagne. And I can't blame them. Life is fun. It really is. Life is a good idea. And one of the things you want to do is participate in it. You don't want to say, I'm 18, oh, I guess I'll have my baby, and that's going to be the end of my life. That is not a life. You want to get out and do something. And so I just wanted to, I'm an old lady, and I think being an old, I definitely recommend 70. I do. If you're not doing anything, come and say, ooh, I don't know. 70 is wonderful because you fall in love around 68 or 69 with somebody all over again. It's a great idea. And I know people say you should be faithful, but why should you be faithful? You can't eat with so much salt, you can't eat with so much pepper, you know what I'm saying? So at your age, fall in love. It's great. It makes you feel good. You go out and get yourself a new wardrobe. You're smiling a lot. And whoever you're being unfaithful with will appreciate it because ultimately you've learned a new trick. And I know you're not allowed to say things like that, but life is, but it's true. Because it all just gets to be too boring that you're living your life by somebody else's rules. This is your life. And it ought to be a good idea, and it ought to be something that you enjoy. We're here celebrating Martin, and I'm a big fan of Martin. He's a great guy. But we remember, historically, we can't do anything with Dr. King unless we look at Rosa Parks. And everybody sort of wants to ooh, well, what? Where would Dr. King be if Rosa hadn't said, no, I am not going to get up? That quiet strength of hers. So I wrote a poem. Well, I've written a lot of poems. I had the pleasure. I haven't stalked many people in my life, but Mrs. Parks, I have stalked a couple. Miss Parks was one of them. It was a rainy day. I just thought I should tell you this story. It was a rainy day. We were in Philadelphia in the old airport, and it was raining. I mean, it wasn't raining, it was storming. And so we were sitting down. Now, I have a couple of skills, but one of my great skills, in all fairness to me, is that I can go through any airport on planet Earth without actually waking up. Because I've been doing it so long, I can do that. And these days, we didn't have to go through security, so you didn't even have to respond to anybody. And I walked into the Philadelphia airport and sat down. Now, I am a paranoid, I'm a 60s person, so I never have my back exposed. I'm doing way better. That's the truth. But I don't like my back exposed. So I walked in, and the airport is like that. And so I walked to the far side and sat so that I could prop my back up, so that I could then go to sleep until it stopped raining. And you know how you just kind of look around, and I looked at her, I said, damn, that lady looks like Rosa Parks. And I can't see very much without them, so I put my glasses on. I said, my God, it's Rosa Parks, because she was sitting there with Elaine, with her friend, her person that went with her. says Rosa Parks. I don't want you to think ill of me because actually I'm a nice person. And I don't think that I'm prejudiced in any real sense of the word. But there was a white man sitting next to Mrs. Parks, and I knew he didn't know who he was sitting next to. I mean that with no disrespect. And I thought, somebody has to move. Now, Elaine was on one side. No, somebody had to move. And I knew I wasn't going to move the black woman. I'm not a fool. So I knew I had to deal with the white guy. And it's always a question, as many of us know, no matter what our color, dealing with white guys, you have to really negotiate that space. And so I thought the easiest thing to do and he said, I'm sorry. Because there's nothing like a black woman with an attitude. And he got up, which is what I wanted him to do. And I sat down and I said, Ms. Parks, I'm Nikki Giovanni, I'm a writer, because I didn't have any clue. And she said, oh, baby, black love is black wealth, which is a line from my poem. And I was like, let it rain. And it was just so wonderful. Ms. Parks was a great woman. She had a wonderful sense of humor. I'll tell you one other Mrs. Parks story because I got to know her and her good friend Johnny Mae Carr. And one of the things that you could do to Mrs. Parks in any number of ways, you could tease her because she was a serious person, and so she took everything seriously. And we were sitting around having, I used to drink coffee. I didn't start drinking wine until I had cancer, but that's a longer story. But that's the truth. But we were having coffee one day, Miss Carr, we were all sitting there, and I was going like, Rosa, it's amazing to me when I look at your life, and it is, to realize you've only made one mistake. It's an amazing thing. And you know how you see some little old lady's face fall because her face could fall. Ms. Parks is a beautiful woman, but her face fell. And she was gathering herself, and you could see that. And she said, and what would that be, baby? And I said, you an AKA. Because I'm a Delta. And I probably have to explain that because half the white people in the room say, what the hell was that? But it's 3 black sororities that, Alpha Kappa Alpha is our mother. Delta Sigma Theta we came out of that, and then the Zetas. And so Mrs. Parks, as well as Coretta King, made the same mistake. They were both AKA. So we're all Delta Sigma Theta. We like, how come Rosa wasn't with us? So we got to tease about it. And she was looking at me like, you're crazy. Mrs. Parks was sitting on a bus, and again, everybody acts like, oh, her feet were tired. I don't think so. Because if you think about how many people sit on buses in 1954, and their feet are tired, you're going to come up with a lot of tired feet. Only one of them caused a revolution. And one of the things that was important about Mrs. Parks is that we have to, and this is what history does to us, we have to roll that back. So when we look at December 1st, 1954, and we look at Mrs. Parks, what is going to propel her to decide to make a stance? It's not going to be the first time that she's ever going to be kicked off a bus because she has been kicked off. If you study it, she's been kicked off the bus before. But we had a situation in 54, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 decision that separate is inherently unequal in Brown versus Board of Education. It was the correct decision. Supreme Court Justice Warren was correct in waiting till he could get a 9-0 decision, because had it been an 8-1 or 7-2 decision, it still would have prevailed, but we would have unraveled it by now, because we've seen what some of our friends in the Republican Party, not to mention libertarians and some of those other fools, are trying to do in terms of separating black people from white people, which doesn't make any sense, but that's not why I'm here today. We know that the South was incredibly and stupidly upset about a decision that said kids should go to school together. Excuse me, but they were. And so we know that when we got to that summer in 54, the state that I now live in, Virginia, had the Byrd decision. And the Byrd decision is that we are going to close all public schools, which they pretty much did. We know that the South reacted very, very negatively, but then we got, in the words of Nina Simone, Mississippi GD. If you recall, Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee makes me lose my rest, and everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn, boom, boom. This is a show tune, she would say, but the show hasn't been written yet. And people got mad at Nina, but Nina was just telling the truth. Nonetheless, in 1954, we have a kid from Chicago. He's a 14-year-old boy, just turned 14, actually. He is, he's got a stutter because he's had polio, and he has a limp. And those people who are my age know that what Emmett, his name is Emmett Till, what Emmett's trying to do is turn that limp into a doo-wop walk so that he can look cool. We know that his uncle came to Chicago and said to his mother, you know, why don't you let the boy come down and stay with us for a while? Of course, Mrs. Bradley, his mother was Mrs. Bradley by then, Mrs. Bradley was concerned because she knew Mississippi. She's a Mississippian. And we know that that was an incredibly cruel state, and I'm glad that they're doing better. Oxford, one of my favorite cities, but nonetheless, in 54, they were not nice people. And so she tried to say to her son, you know, when people say things to you, say yes, sir, and no, sir. But he's a 14-year-old city kid, so we know how long this is going to last. He actually, as you know, takes the train. He finally made the train. His Uncle Mose takes him. They go down to Money. Now, Emmett is going to be the kid who's visiting, so this is going to be a problem. Many of us in this room are going to have similar problems with similar relatives. And when Emmett comes, he's got gabardine pants, he's got white shirts. He flips his shirts up. His mother, he's an only child, he's spoiled, he's got soft shoes. His cousins are wearing brogans and blue jeans, those big blue jeans, and they have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they have to go out and they pick cotton, because you pick cotton until, from sunup until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's too hot. And so that's what they did. And so Emmett didn't have to get up and pick cotton. Emmett could sleep in, and his aunt would fix breakfast when he woke up, and so the cousins were being upset. Emmett was also doing what 14-year-old boys do, and he was teasing his cousins. You know, I'm a city kid, I know what's going on. And the cousins were responding, because they're kids too. And they were, you don't know how to deal with white folks. And Emmett was like, yeah, I know how to deal with white folks. I had a white girlfriend. And he pulls out his wallet, and he's got a picture in the wallet. Now, some of us have bought wallets, or we've bought photographs, you know, and you know how you get that picture of that white girl? I mean, anybody in the world knows that this boy doesn't know this girl, but the cousins were being pushed, and it was a lot for them to take. So one of them said to Emmett, well, you know, there's a girl in that store over there. You so smart, go say something to her. Now we're gonna have a problem. So Emmett has money too, and money at that time would have been maybe his mother, maybe Bradley, maybe gave him $5, which would have been 5 more than his cousins had. Well, if you recall, people my age do recall, things like Mary Jane's were 2 for a penny, you know, there's a lot of 2 for a penny candy, bubble gum, things like that. So Emmett walks into the store. Now, we are definitely recognizing we're on dangerous ground here. Emmett's going to do, no matter what he says, he's going to do what everybody else did, what I did, what people my age in this room did. When you walk into a store, and the stores were run mostly by white people at that point in the black community, when you walk into the store, you're going to have to wait. Adult white people are going to be waited on first. Adult black people are going to be waited on second. It's going to be men, women, men, women. When everybody else is cleared out, we now have colored children. So Emmett is standing there. As he walks up to the counter, we know, because we've all lived through, the people my age in this room have lived through it, the first thing he had to do was to put his money on the counter. If he doesn't show his money, she's not going to talk to him. So let's say Emmett put a quarter on, because I don't know what Emmett put on, but he showed his money. So let's say he put a quarter, and she said, what do you want, or how may I help you? I'm just going to assume that she was relatively polite. How may I help you? And he's going to say something like 10 cents worth of bubble gum, please. So that's going to give him 20 pieces of bubble gum. She's going to go to the counter, and she's going to count out 20 pieces of bubble gum, and she's going to bring it back, and she is going to put that on the counter along with his 15-cent change. She is then going to remove her hand, and he will take his purchase. We know that. Anything else that happens, he's going to get shot. If he reaches his hand up there, she has a gun. Now, we know that. That's a part of the testimony. She has a gun right here. If he's doing anything else, she has been trained by her husband, who is off with his brother-in-law, Milam and Bryant, are off with his brother-in-law, pulling shrimp, These are poor white people who are obviously making a living in the black community, so there are issues there. But we know that. So we know Emmett took what he did, and we know that he walked to the door. This is where we have the problem. When he got to the door, he said something, because he never did anything. He said something, bye, baby, or see you, baby, something smart, and he giggled, because 14-year-old boys giggle. And he ran out. And of course, his cousins say, man, you crazy talking to that white girl like that. And he's like, I didn't do anything. You know, he's laughing. But nobody told Mose what had happened. When Bryant and Milam came back home the next night, not that night, but the next night, we know, and we have to know, that he didn't know what he was doing. We know that one of the cousins said to Mr. Bryant, what you gonna do about that boy talking smart to your wife? And now we have a real problem. Now, they said that Milam got drunk, and they said that Milam was mean. I don't know, frankly speaking, to be honest, I've been drunk, but I've never taken a 14-year-old boy out and beaten the hell out of him. So I don't think that we can blame liquor for that. I think we have to go to the mean on that one. And we know that about midnight, they went to Moses' house and knocked on the door. Mose knows, because he's a black American living in Mississippi, if you have a knock on your door at midnight, there is a serious problem. So he went to the door trying to figure out, how do I solve, what is it and how do I solve it? When he got to the door, he said, who's there? And a man had a flashlight. He put it on his face because he wasn't embarrassed or ashamed. He said, it's me, Mr. Bryant. And Mose said, what do you want? And he said, I want that boy from Chicago. And Mose said, I have a couple of kids from Chicago. What happened? He said, I want that boy that did all that talking. Now, we are here for a man that did all that talking. We watched Malcolm X be shot down on a Sunday in his chapel, in his own church, doing all that talking. We have seen everybody from Socrates, doing all of that talking, being destroyed. So now Mose knows that there's not much he can do. He starts to stall for time. He starts to try to find a way. What did he do and how can we solve it? And finally, Bryant says to him, either bring that boy out, and I'm sure the term was not boy, or I'm going to kill everybody in the house. They had every reason to believe that that is exactly what would happen. So now he has to go and get Emmett and say to Emmett, you have to go with this man. He knows this cannot be well. Emmett, of course, had no idea in the world what was going to happen here. So he gets his socks and he starts to put it on. And Bryant says to him, you don't need your socks. And Emmett said, I never put my shoes on without socks. He had no idea the trouble he was in. He gets taken out and he gets put on a pickup truck. And there's a Negro there named Too Tall Jones. And Too Tall Jones is there for the express and only purpose of making sure Emmett doesn't jump out. They take him to Milam's barn, and they said his cries could be heard all over the Delta. They beat that boy way to a bloody mess. It was a terrible thing. When dawn came up, they looked and saw the bodies. They saw what they had done to the body. They knew it shouldn't be seen. We have an eye missing. We have a hole in his head. And it was presumed, of course, that that hole was a gun that they shot him, but it wasn't. It was a drill. And so it was a terrible thing. He had been castrated. He was just a bunch of blood. They told Too Tall Jones to go get a barbed wire and a gin fan. And Jones went and got that, and they wrapped it around his neck, or what we are now going to learn later was left of his neck. And they took him to the Tallahatchie and they threw him in. The hope was, of course, that the fishes and the crabs would eat the body, and it would be like any other thing that happened in Mississippi. Oh, we can't find him. Or as the sheriff said to Mamie, Mamie is on her way down. The minute she found out her son was missing, she's on her way to Mississippi. Sheriff says to her, oh, he's probably in Detroit with his grandmother, laughing. Everybody knew Emmett is probably actually dead. We know 3 days later, and I always liked the fact that it was 3 days, because when we decided to kill Jesus, it was 3 days later that he's going to rise up. So we have 3 days later, little white boy's out fishing, and he sees something in the water, and he runs to get the sheriff, and the sheriff pulls it in, and of course, you and I know, we all know it was Emmett. But at this point, the sheriff is still saying, we don't even know if it's colored. Well, the sheriff, whatever else is wrong with the sheriff, is prejudice. If the sheriff had thought that that was a white man, he would have sent it to a white mortuary. But he sent it over to Century Mortuary, which is a black mortuary. You can go there, it's right in Greenville. And Greenville is to money what you are to Rochester. So it's just right there. So they sent the body over, and the sheriff told the mortuary to seal the body and not open it. Now, this is the beginning to where we get to my point. There are a group of men who I think are the greatest men in America as a group. They're the Pullman Porters. And these are the men who took us by train back and forth. These are the men, 1,000 men called George. Everybody called them George because of George Pullman. But these are the Porters. The Pullman Porters said to Mrs. Bradley, to Mamie Bradley, what do you want? And she said, I want Emmett's body home. She knew that was her boy. I'm a mother, I have a son. I would know my son. Many of us in this room will have sons and daughters. I would know my dog. You understand what I'm saying? If he'd run over by a truck, you know what you love, and you know when it's not there. And she said, I want his body home. I want to take him home to Chicago. When the northbound train came through, they stopped the train, the Pullman Porters did, and they walked over from where Century Funeral Home is to the railroad tracks, about 1,000 yards. It's just right there. And they stopped the train. They went over to get the body. And they took the casket and they put it on the train and they released the train and they went on into Atlanta. Now we know that they put that casket in their personal things. They didn't put it with the freight, because if they had put it with the freight, someone would have discovered it. And I think it is fair to say that if that body had been discovered on that train, all of those men would have been killed to protect the people who did what they did. So they kept it with themselves. And we pulled out of Atlanta and we went to Chicago, where we unloaded it. And Mamie asked for a, what are those things you stick it in? Yeah, and so that she could lift it up. And they said, you know, I don't know if you want to see this. And she, this is my boy. And she opened it up. And of course, we saw it. Jet magazine, as you know, was there. And Jet took the pictures. And we saw what they had done to Emmett. They moved him over to Metropolitan AME Church because it was the biggest church in Chicago. And this is what I do for you. If you're ever on Jeopardy and they say the biggest civil rights demonstration before the March on Washington, just in case you can say the viewing of the body of Emmett Till. Over 100,000 people viewed that body. People just kept coming through to view the body. Now this is in August. We had the trial of Bryant and Milam in September. And we know that Bryant and Milam were found not guilty. And nobody was surprised about that. There's a man named William Bradford Huey who worked for Look magazine. And Look magazine gave him $3,000 and said, go buy the story. Go see what they have to say, because everybody knew that they did it. They sold their story because there's something called double jeopardy. We all should read the Constitution. If you're not doing anything else, you should read the Constitution. And you're not allowed double jeopardy. You are, you know, that girl, Amanda Knox, that killed that girl, and the Titans are trying her again, or they've tried her again and found her guilty. That couldn't have happened in the United States. You're either found guilty or not guilty, right? And so Bryant and Milam were not guilty, but they sold the story. They said it was an approved killing. That was the headline. This is an approved killing. And it was, of course, a great embarrassment. Everybody, they got their money. This was the end of September. So now we have October. 30 days have September, June, and November. All the rest have 31. We have 31 days in October. We have 30 days in November. And we are now 61 days after the resolution of Emmett Till. December 1st, 1955, we now have Mrs. Parks on a bus. So there's a direct line between the murder of Emmett Till and Mrs. Parks. I just wanted to sort of bring us up to date on that. I wrote a poem, I've written many, but I wrote this particular poem for Rosa. This is for the Pullman Porters, who organized when people said they couldn't, and carried the Pittsburgh Courier and the Chicago Defender to the Black Americans in the South so that they would know they were not alone. This is for the Pullman Porters, who helped Thurgood Marshall go south and come back north to fight the fight that resulted in Brown versus the Board of Education. Because even though Kansas is west, and even though Topeka is the birthplace of Gwendolyn Brooks, who wrote the powerful "The Chicago Defender Sends a Man to Little Rock," it was the Pullman Porters who whispered to the traveling men, both the blues men and the race men, so that they would know what was going on. This is for the Pullman Porters who smiled as if they were happy and laughed like they were tickled when some folks were around, and who silently rejoiced in 1954 when the Supreme Court announced its 9-0 decision that separate is inherently unequal. This is for the Pullman Porters who smiled and welcomed a 14-year-old boy onto their train in 1955. They noticed his slight limp that he tried to disguise with a doo-wop walk. They noticed his stutter and probably understood why his mother wanted him out of Chicago during the summer when school was out. 14-year-old black boys with limps and stutters are apt to try to prove themselves in dangerous ways when mothers aren't around to look after them. So this is for the Pullman Porters who looked over that 14-year-old while the train rolled the reverse of the Blues Highway from Chicago to St. Louis to Memphis to Mississippi. This is for the men who kept him safe. And if Emmett Till had been able to stay on the train all summer, he would have maybe grown a bit of a paunch, certainly lost his hair, probably have worn bifocals, and bounced his grandchildren on his knee, telling them about his summer riding the rails. But he had to get off that train and ended up in Money, Mississippi, and was horribly, brutally, inexcusably, and unacceptably murdered. This is for the Pullman Porters who, when the sheriff was trying to get the body secretly buried, got Emmett's body on the northbound train, got his body home to Chicago, where his mother said, "I want the world to see what they did to my boy." And this is for all the mothers who cried, and this is for all the people who said never again. And this is about Rosa Parks, whose feet were not so tired. It had been, after all, an ordinary day until the bus driver gave her the opportunity to make history. This is about Mrs. Rosa Parks from Tuskegee, Alabama, who was also the field secretary of the NAACP. This is about the moment Rosa Parks shouldered her cross, put her worldly goods aside, and was willing to sacrifice her life so that that young man in Money, Mississippi, who was so well protected by the Pullman Porters, will not have died in vain. When Mrs. Parks said no, a passionate movement was begun. No longer would there be a reliance on the law, there was a higher law. When Mrs. Parks brought that light of hers to expose the evil of the system, the sun came and rested on her shoulders, bringing the heat and light of truth. Others would follow Mrs. Parks. 4 young men in Greensboro, North Carolina would also say no. Great voices would be raised, singing the praises of God and exhorting us to forgive those who trespass against us. But it was the Pullman Porters who safely got Emmett to his granduncle, and it was Mrs. Rosa Parks who could not stand that death. And in not being able to stand it, she sat back down. So quite naturally, thank you. I was writing long in the spirit. I do eventually go shorter, but quite naturally, you have to write about Martin, but you needed that in front of that. And I wrote a poem for Martin in the spirit of Martin, which is really, by the way, if you're ever in D.C., there's its own permanent exhibit right now in the Portrait Gallery. And I was really lucky because poets never get a chance to be in things like, so this is for those of you in the room who write, you never get a chance to be like in the Portrait Gallery. And they called me and said, "Nikki, we're doing a retrospective on Martin Luther King. Would you like to participate?" And I said, "Oh, you bet," because who wouldn't want to write? I've written a lot about Martin because it was great. Martin was not a friend, and I just was saying to your president, I need to quit. I tend to refer to almost everybody first name, but I knew Dr. King. I mean, if I called, he would take my call, but we weren't like friends because he was Martin and I wasn't. And you always have to kind of understand where you are in the scheme of things. But I was the kid. I think in my other life I was a piece of dust because I was always the kid just sitting in the corner listening. And there would be meetings and stuff, and I could. For one, I had a good bladder in those days, so I could sit in. You have to be able to sit. If you have to pee a lot, they'll notice you. And so it's true. So you sit down and you listen and you're just watching how things, and it's very hard negotiating the kind of things that Martin had to negotiate. It's very hard, and opening up the opportunities for all of us to be better people that he did, I think is commendable. And I think that most of us wouldn't have that courage. We knew, and he did too, that Martin was not going to die of old age. He knew that whatever it was, he was going to pay a hard price for it, and a lot of people have. You know, by the way, I just need to share, you know, Winnie Mandela is a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and we're so proud of our soror, and thank you. Ooh. And we need to do something. We need to do something for Winnie because, you know, we talk about Nelson and we talk about what he gave up for the country, but the main thing that Nelson Mandela gave up for the country was Winnie, because all of those years that he was in prison, it was Winnie that had his back. And I just think that it's kind of important because we act like it doesn't matter, but knowing that somebody is there and somebody not only loves you, but somebody is willing to do whatever it takes to keep you out there, to keep your name out there. If they could have silenced Winnie, they would have gotten rid of Nelson. And so it's kind of important. And sometimes, you know, we look at history and we're not looking at the really great things that people have done. I was thrilled to write a poem for Martin in the spirit of Martin. This is a sacred poem. Blood has been shed to consecrate it. Wash your hands, remove your shoes, bow your head. I have a dream. That was a magical time. Hi-ho, silver away. Oh, Cisco, oh, Pancho, here I come to save the day. I want the world to see what they did to my boy. No, 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 I'm not going to move. If we are wrong, then the Constitution of the United States is wrong. Montgomery, Birmingham, Selma, 4 little girls, constant threats, constant harassment, constant fear. SCLC, Ralph and Martin, father knows best, leave it to Beaver. Ed Sullivan, how long? Not long. But what, Mr. Thoreau said to Mr. Emerson, are you doing out? This is a letter from Birmingham City Jail. This is a eulogy for Albany. This is a water hose for Anniston. This is a thank you to Diane Nash. This is a flag for James Farmer. This is a how can I make it without you to Ella Baker. This is for the red clay of Georgia that yielded black men of courage, black men of vision, black men of hopes, bent over cotton or sweet potatoes or pool tables and baseball diamonds, playing for a chance to live free and breathe easy and have enough money to take care of the folks they love. This is why we can't wait. That swirling Mississippi wind, the Alabama pine, that Tennessee dust, defiling the clothes the women washed, those hot winds the lemonade couldn't cool, that let the women know we too must overcome. This is for Fannie Lou Hamer, Joanne Robinson, Septima Clark, Daisy Bates, all the women who said, baby, 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 I know you didn't mean to lose your job. I know you didn't mean to gamble the rent money. I know you didn't mean to hit me. I know the Lord is going to make a way. I know I'm leaning on the everlasting arms. How much pressure does the earth exert on carbon to make a diamond? How long does the soil push against the flesh, molding, 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 the moan that becomes a cry that bursts forth, crystalline, unbreakable, priceless, incomparable. Martin, I made my vow to the Lord that I never would turn back. How much pressure do the sins of the world press against the heart of a man who becomes the voice of his people? He should have had a tattoo, you know, Freedom Now or something like that. Should have braided his hair, carried his pool cue in a mahogany case, wafted that wonderful laugh over a plate of skillet fried chicken, drop biscuits, dandelion greens on the side. This is a sacred poem. Open your arms, turn your palms up, feel the spirit of greatness, and be redeemed.